Right. To answer some of these questions, I don't know your background and your strengths and your weaknesses, so I have to assume certain things. And if you want me to go more in detail, just email me back or just let me know if you didn't understand a certain step in the process. So on this first one, if you notice what you have in common, you have a 2x minus 3 both in common, and you have an x plus 1 in common. And so that's your GCF. You're going to factor those out. And just like how many can you factor out? Well, if you factor out 2x minus 3, you factor 2 of them out, and you factor out an x plus 1 to the negative 1/2. And you'll see it, why you factor out a negative 1/2. Well, you'll see it once we do that. And then what remains, you still have 6 and x plus 1. And again, if you think of this, x, let's just say x to the negative 1/2. I'm just showing you that this works. So x times negative 1/2 times x. Like if you check out by using the distributed property, if you multiply that out, what you have left is x plus. Here you have x to the first power, and so that right there to the 1/2 power. So that right there you can check out by using the distributed property, because that's what you end up with is x plus 1/2. So that has to be to the first power. So that's how come I do it's to the first power. And then again, if you factor this part out, you're going to have 1/2, and then you still have a 2x minus 3. Okay, so double check that, because again, this happens later on in upper level math, higher math class than this concept where you're factoring out a negative exponent to be able to solve for something. And it's going to happen later on in one of the problems you ask as well. So, and then from here, you should be able to solve it. Because here, use the distributive property, add like terms, and you're going to end up getting 7x plus 9/2, and then all this stuff as well. And that's your, you can put parentheses. And that's your factor. I mean, you factored all of it. Because that's what the directions say. It doesn't say solve, or it's not an equation, so we just had to factor it. And then simplify. All right, on this problem right here, I'm not sure, where your mistakes are. You can always send me your work too. I can check to see where your mistake is. But here you have 6x squared, just using the distributive property. And then you have minus 1, add 7x equals 0. So 6x squared plus x minus 1. And then you just have to factor it. So, I'm not sure. It says solve by factoring. I mean, you can also, technically have to solve by factoring, but you could use the quadratic if you want. But, I think factoring is superior. So 2x plus 1 and then 3x minus 1. And then you set this equal to 0, and you get negative 1/2. You set this equal to 0, and you get positive 1/3. And you can always check your answers as well. So, plug them back in to see if it actually works. Especially with quadratics, what you're trying to find. When it sets equal to 0, that means you're trying to find the zeros. If you remember when you graph a parabola, if you graph a parabola, those are the zeros across the x line, the x-intercepts, and that's where those guys are. That's where the zeros are on that graph. Now, in this problem, I'm not sure. Again, I'm not sure what how you solve this. So one thing you should automatically, before you even get started, notice what x cannot be. So x cannot be negative 2, and it cannot be negative 3/2. So if we get one of those answers, it can't be those because you can't have 0 on the bottom of a fraction. So that's something before you even start solving, you need to consider that what x cannot be. All right, now, different ways to solve this. What I like doing is finding the common denominator, and then I'm going to multiply everything by the common denominator. So x plus 2 and 2x plus 3. And you're multiplying this times the entire thing, like literally by each fraction. So, when you multiply the right side, you're going to end up getting, it's just 1 times all that. You're going to end up getting 2x squared, what is that, 7x plus 6. And now, again, that's multiplying it by 1. Now, when you multiply it by this fraction and this fraction, so make sure you understand what happens. The reason why you're multiplying by the common denominator is because when you do that, like when you multiply this first fraction, see the 2x plus 3's will cross out. And then it's really just x and then x plus 2. And look, there's no denominator. And then here, we got to be very careful on this one. A common mistake happens because of that subtraction sign. You got to be careful on that. So here, when you multiply all of this by x plus 2, by this whole first fraction, the x plus 2's will cross out. And then you have x plus 3 times 2x plus 3. Again, make sure you study that step because that's a very important step, what I just did. And notice I have no fractions. And that's the reason why I think this method is a superior method to be able to solve this. So again, you just solve this and you're going to end up getting x squared plus 2x, x squared, 2x squared, 6x, 3x, 9x plus 9. And 7. Couldn't read my own writing there. All right, and then we're going to combine like terms, and we're going to end up getting 3x squared plus 14x plus 15 equal to 0. And then again, factoring. Let's see, 5, 3, 5, 3. Yes, that works. And then you set this equal to 0, and you're going to get negative 5/3, and you set this equal to 0, and you're going to get negative 3. And we did not get one of those answers, so, and you can always plug them back in to check to see if they work. So, but those are the right answers. And on this problem, you solved it correctly, except you should always, and I've said this a couple of problems that we worked, you should always check your answers to see if they actually work, especially with square roots. So, like for instance, if I did plug in 5, if I plugged in 5, you should try to plug it in and see if it works. It doesn't. So, even though you solved it and you got it correct, 5 actually doesn't work. So the only answer is 8 on this problem. So make sure you always double check. Plug them back in. If on a test, make sure, that's the last step you should do is go back and actually check to see it. But specifically with square roots, check it because you got to make sure that it actually does work. All right, and then lastly on this problem, now this is an interesting problem. I like these problems. A lot of times students get stuck on this problem and not sure what to do. Well, first bring everything over to one side. This is kind of like that one problem where I said you have to learn how to factor out negative exponents. And now the objective, just imagine if this was x squared plus 2x minus 48. See, that makes life easy then, because then we can just factor. Okay, then it would just become x plus 8 and x minus 6, and then we can solve it after that. Okay, now, how can I go from this step to that step? It's because we factor out something that's going to make it look nice. A big hint to you is this last term, it goes straight from here to here. That means we want to factor out x to the negative 3/2. Now that doesn't always work, but if you try to check it, I mean, use the distributed property. I mean, if you take this times this, see, it gives you x to the 1/2. And then this times this, it gives you to x to the negative 1/2. So it works. So now we get down to this. And then to actually solve for it, you're going to set this equal to 0, which you're going to get 0. You're going to set this equal to 0, and you're going to get negative 8. And you're going to set this equal to 0, and you're going to get 6. Now, it says all of these say find all real solutions, by the way. So, we're not, just for future reference, sometimes you're going to get imaginary numbers, sometimes you're going to get real numbers. If the directions say all real numbers, you should only answer the real numbers. Now, we only got real number answers, but they have to work. So if you go back and actually plug in 0, like if you plug in 0 to these answers, you're going to end up seeing that it doesn't work. Okay, so, and the reason is because like right here, or here, whichever, but the negative exponent means to flip. So when you flip 0, I mean, you can't have 0 on the bottom. So 0 cannot work on that problem. Now, again, the same thing with negative 8. If I plug in negative 8 to actually check it, you're going to have the square, this means the square root of x, and the square root of negative 8 is not a real number. So again, these two answers don't actually work. And then 6, if you plug it back in, it actually does work. So all of these problems, have, I don't want to say tricks, but it's just something you got to get used to, especially at this upper level math. Factoring out negative exponents and especially checking your answers. If you have any questions about any of these processes or how to factor, whatever solving, just let me know. I'll be glad to go more detail.